In this short tutorial we'll look at the nature of alleles and gene loci. So an allele is simply a particular version or form of a gene. Remember, a gene is a coding region along the length of DNA. So it will be a series of nucleotides or a base sequence that codes for a particular protein. So that's what a gene is. An allele is a version of a gene. So you could have a gene that codes for protein X, but there could be two versions of that gene or two alleles of that gene which give a slightly different protein outcome. So the allele is a version of a particular gene. Every gene found on a chromosome is found at a particular spot, a particular location, and that's referred to its locus. So the locus of a gene is its location along the length of a chromosome. So here is the gene locus for gene B. Here is the locus for gene A. Here is the locus for gene P. That is its spot on the chromosome. So on a homologous pair of chromosomes, remember, one set of chromosomes comes from mum, one from dad. So the maternal and paternal chromosomes, they will have genes at exactly the same locus along their length. So if it's a homologous pair, the genes will always be found at the same locus along the length of the chromosomes, even though the alleles might be different. So alleles could be the same, so you could have exactly the same version of the gene on each of the homologous chromosomes, or you could have a different version of the gene. If you have exactly the same version or the same alleles on a homologous pair, then we talk about this gene as being homozygous. It could be that the gene is, or the allele is a dominant form of the gene. So if it's a dominant form of the gene, that means if it's present, it will always produce its protein, it will always be expressed. If it's a recessive version of the allele, then it will only be expressed if there are two copies present. If the dominant allele is present, then the recessive allele will be masked. It will not be expressed as a protein. So you could be homozygous dominant, so you carry two copies of the dominant allele, as in here. You could be homozygous recessive, you carry two copies of the recessive allele, or you could be heterozygous, where you carry one copy of the dominant allele and one copy of the recessive allele. There's also the term hemizygous. And hemizygous generally only refers to X and Y chromosomes. Remember that along the X chromosome will be a series of genes, but also remember that on the Y chromosome, it's a different chromosome, it's much shorter. There's a different set of genes. So if you're a male and you only carry one X chromosome, then you are hemizygous for the genes that you carry on it. In other words, you only have half the copy of the genes. So you have only one copy of this gene here. You don't have a copy on the X chromosome and another copy on the Y chromosome, because the Y chromosome carries a different set of genes to the X. So you would be described as hemizygous if you're a male. You carry just half the genes compared to the autosomes. So you carry one gene here, one gene here, one gene here. The Y chromosome just carries one copy of each gene. If you're a female and you carry two X chromosomes, you will, like any other homologous pair, have exactly the same genes along your length, and you'll be typically homozygous or heterozygous, as we've just described. Let's look at the term X-linked or Y-linked gene. An X-linked gene just means a gene that is located on the X chromosome. So X-linkage or X-linked gene is a gene found on the X chromosome, and a Y-linked gene or Y-linkage is a gene found on the Y chromosome.